Alrighty, so today we're going to do the season preview of the Colorado Rapids, and after a disastrous season last year where they easily were the worst team in the Western Conference, and I even did a moving forward series talk about how it just feels like it's kind of doom and gloom for this team heading into the upcoming season, considering this regime not known to spend a lot of money and make some big move. Boy, did this regime prove everybody wrong. I mean, this front office not only were making moves this offseason, oh, they were making big moves that really catch a lot of people's attention and even surprise a lot of Rapids faithful that, out of all the regime that is making these big moves, nobody thought that the Colorado Rapids has done. And you got to say that, with the way how they finished last season, and even though controversially they decided to hire Chris Armas, which again, we'll see whether if that is a good signing or is that going to be a disastrous signing, considering Chris Armas' resume in MLS has not been very good the last couple of years. There's really nowhere where but up for this Rapids team, consider the season that they had last year, which they finished with a 5-12-17 record and finished with just 27 points. And if it wasn't for the gong show that we saw in Toronto, they would have easily win the wooden spoon last year, but they still did finish dead last in the Western Conference. Now, their last playoff appearance was in 2022, but it's been a while since they have won a playoff round. I mean, they have made a lot of playoff appearance for the past couple of years. I think last year was kind of one of those years where they really bottomed out and looked like they were the Rapids team from like 2017, 18, and 19, where they're just pretty much our bottom feeder every single season. But it's been a while since they last won a playoff round. Out of all those flip parents, they always get eliminated either in the first round or when they got that bye, being the number one seed, they got eliminated by the Portland Timbers. So, yeah, the last time they won a playoff round was all the way back in 2016, and that was the year that they went all the way to the Western Conference Final, only falling to the eventual champion, the Seattle Sounders. Now, despite the fact the Rapids have their fair share of bad season, and this team has had a lot of bad years also as well. They actually have won an MLS Cup. They won it in 2010, which will go down as one of the greatest Cinderella story of all time in MLS. I mean, that Rapids team, a team that I think they were the number 6 seed and they were the last team in the playoffs. The fact that they were able to make a run in the playoffs and went all the way to MLS Cup and was facing against an FC Dallas team was heavily in favorite of winning that MLS Cup. I mean, that is going to be something that, it hasn't really been replicated. I mean, the closest I would say in terms of the Cinderella story ending up with an MLS Cup champion probably was RSL a couple of years ago when they were the last team in and they sneak into the playoffs literally in the last minute against Sporting KC, and then they use that field to field them all the way to the Western Conference Final. But to this day, we have not seen a team that is the last team in to basically run the table and win MLS Cup besides the Colorado Rapids did back in 2010. Now, looking at some of the transfer, and this is where we're going to talk about the big moves that they made this offseason. Obviously, the biggest move they made this offseason is bring Georgi Mihailovic to the Colorado Rapids. And, there was a lot of talk of, Mihailovic potentially going to some big profile kind of team now that he's coming back to MLS. There's even talks that he was going to go back to the Chicago Fire. But little do we know that out of all team that we thought that he was going to land his spot, I didn't think Colorado was going to be the place for him to land his spot. But yeah, the Rapids, they spent a record transfer fee of bringing Georgi Mihailovic to this team. And then they also got a relatively under the radar move of bringing Jasper Loffelson from Real Salt Lake, which to this day I think this kind of doesn't make any sense. The fact that RSL decided to let him go, consider he was a really good player in the fullback position last season. And then they also made another big move to everybody's surprise by bringing Zach Steffen to the Colorado Rapids. Now, obviously, Zach Steffen is not the same player as what we saw a couple of years ago when he was a regular in the U.S. men's national team, and his stock has really plummeted ever since he made that move to Manchester City. But still, this is a guy that he is still considered to be a top tier goalkeeper and a guy that again it also kind of feels like this is a very Colorado Rapids move where this is a team that likes to do that money ball approach but also like to find players that are kind of retread or kind of just reclamation project and insert them to their roster and will instantly find success. I won't be surprised. That could be the case of Zach Steffen. Don't be surprised. He could be a top 10 caliber goalkeeper, even though he's been having some rough years in the last couple of seasons. And then they also got another under the radar move of bringing Omir Fernandez to from the New York Red Bulls. This I think was also a big surprise considering I thought Omir Fernandez eventually if he was going to be joining another team. It was going to be joining another team in Europe, not within the league and not within the Colorado Rapids. But I will say that the Rapids they have done a good job in terms of getting players that have a huge ceiling of potential, making their move to Europe and develop them in a way where either the team in Europe is going to get him or the fact that he's going to join a caliber team in MLS. I mean, an example of that is Kellen Acosta, when there was a lot of question of why Kellen Acosta decided to go with the Colorado Rapids, but he developed to a great player to a point where he got his chances with the national team and also made his big move to LAFC. They also got Luis Diaz, though I think they also moved on from him as soon as they got him. And then in the draft, they got Wayne Fredericks and Kamini Stewart Baines as their two draft pick. But they also bought back Sam Vines in this team. So yeah, the Rapids, it seems like they're looking to try to bring back some of their players that they sold back to MLS, and that's not a bad idea because we saw this with Cole Bassett when he went to Europe. It didn't quite work out. Rapids decided to bring him back, and he really thrived, especially after Robin Fraser was no longer the head coach. And don't be surprised, it could be the same thing with Sam Vines. Didn't really quite have the best time in Belgium, but now back in MLS, and he's easily one of the best fullbacks in the league. And then they, of course, got Nate Jones and Limian Diak, another very underrated signing that will really help their midfield. Now, in terms of players that is no longer on this team, so they move on from Andrew Gutman, who is returning to his hometown club in the Chicago Fire. They also move on from Brian Acosta, who's now with the Portland Timbers. And then recently, they moved on from Diego Rubio, who joined Austin FC. And then, of course, as mentioned, Luis Diaz no longer with the club. Gustavo Garcia, the same thing. They also no longer have Danny Wilson. So some of their English midfielders that they got from the championship in League One, they're no longer there. I mean, Danny Wilson for a long time was there. Same with Jack Price as well. They're no longer with the team. The same goes for Sam Nicholson, no longer with this team. And then William Yarbrough, of course, moving on to the San Jose Earthquakes. And then Michael Barrios moving on to the LA Galaxy. Then they also cut Max, which I think is for the best, consider how bad he was and that he had some off the field situation. They also move on from Miguel Navarro, though he's only on a loan basis. Then they move on from Daniel Chacon, Remy Cabral, Jack Price, Colin Warren, Abraham Rodriguez, Stephen Beitashour, of course, retired this offseason, and then Marco Illich is being loaned out by the Colorado Rapids. Now, when you look at their preseason schedule, so far they've been spending most of their time down in Mexico, which is why all the opponents that they've been facing are against teams that is either in the Liga MX or are in the second division of Mexican soccer. I think it's like the Expansión division that they have. But they lost 3-1 to Atletico Morelos, but then they put a 5 spot against Querétaro by winning 5-1, and they also put another 5 spot on Atlante TFC by winning 5-1. And then they're, of course, going to be returning stateside by playing against Montreal, Hartford Athletics, and Orlando City in a closed door friendly. But when you look at the first 10 game of the season, so they started the season on the road by playing against the Portland Timbers before they're going to return home for their season opener against Nashville SC. Then they got the Rocky Mountain Cup against RSL before they play against the Seattle Sounders, and then they play home against the Houston Dynamo, and then they get to play against LAFC. So that's a really tough stretch. I mean, there are some really good teams that they're going to play, but they also will be playing Messi and friends by going on the road against Inter Miami. I'm pretty sure Rapids fan, when they saw that they were going to play Inter Miami, they were hoping the fact that they were going to be playing them at home. And if that, of course, is the case, I won't be surprised that game might be taking place at Empower Field at Mile High, because I know obviously Dick's Sporting Goods Park, they could easily host it there. I don't think that's going to be the case. The man is going to be crazy if Inter Miami play against the Colorado Rapids in Denver, and that I think it would even be better considering the fact that one of the biggest issue with Dick's Sporting Goods Park, and I know this for sure because I've been there before. It is incredibly hard to get to that stadium from downtown Denver. So if the Rapids does play against Inter Miami, and there's going to be a lot of those bandwagoners and Messi fans that is looking to have a chance to watch him play in person, you have to have it at Empower Field instead of being at Dick's Sporting's Good Park. But obviously, that's not going to happen with the way that this is a road game. Speaking of a road game, they play the San Jose Earthquakes after that before returning home to play against FC Dallas, and then they have to go on the road to play again the defending Supporter Shield winner, that is FC Cincinnati. Now, looking at the post League Cup break, they actually I think have the fewest amount of games out of any team in terms of the post League Cup break because they actually will not be playing on the weekend when every team is going to be returning from the Leagues Cup, so they get the bye week sweepstake as a result of that. So their first game is not going to be until August 31st when they go on the road against FC Dallas, and then their next game is not for another 2 weeks. So yeah, this is kind of a weird schedule that Colorado will have, and especially if they're going to be done in terms of their League Cup adventure this year relatively early, like what we saw last year in the group stage, man, they're going to have not only a very long layoff, but they're going to spend a time where they're going to have a month and a half where there's only going to be two MLS games that is going to take place. But as I said, after that game, they play at home against the Portland Timbers. Then the schedule does get a little more compact. They go on the road to play against Sporting KC, going at home to play against Toronto, and then going on the road to play Minnesota before playing at home and finish their last homestand against the LA Galaxy and the Seattle Sounders. And for decision day game, they're going to be playing against Austin FC on the road. And when you look at those games, I mean, there are some games that I would say that they are going to be facing against teams that they could to be competing for the playoffs. Obviously, I do think that when you look at this team, it's going to be better than what we saw last season. I mean, as I said, this team is not going to be as bad as last season because they really bought him out. And even though I know Chris Armas is the new head coach of this team, and he's a very kind of a controversial show hire for the Rapids because Chris Armas has not had a really good resume in MLS, especially really destroying teams the last couple of jobs that he's taken. But who knows? Maybe we might have a Ben Olsen situation where, I think that was kind of what I said when the Rapids hired Chris Armas, where the Rapids are really hoping that this is a Ben Olsen situation where, Ben Olsen was not a popular hire with the Houston Dynamo, but somehow he's able to guide that team not only to the playoffs, but once again winning a U.S. Open Cup. Now, when you look at the strength of this team, it's got to be the midfield and the winger position. They have some really good pieces in the midfield. And while Jack Price is no longer on this team, Colin Rowland has really stepped up, and he's getting to a point where he's kind of almost won that spot, and that's kind of the reason why they decided to move on from Jack Price. But other than that, Georgi Mihailovic is gonna be that guy that I wonder if he's gonna be playing more on the wing or rather in the number 10 position because you also have Cole Bassett in that number 10 position that you can play. But either way, if they do move Mihailovic in the wing position, that is a good spot too. And not to mention on the right side too, from what I heard, it seems like Calvin Harris is doing very well in the preseason. And this is of course not the DJ, but an actual player that is actually called Calvin Harris. So yeah, I think the midfield and the winger position is a really big strength for this Rapids team. But the weakness of this team is got to be the defense and the number nine position. So as much as I know they made a lot of moves this off season, one thing they still haven't really fixed is who is going to be the guy that is going to be the goal scorer of this team. And especially when they now move on from Diego Rubio, they're really hoping Darren Yappy is going to have his breakout season. I mean, last year, he was given the chance to do so. And while we did see some flashes of brilliance from Yappy, he wasn't delivering in terms of the goal scoring department. And you can have all these kind of flashes of brilliance and stuff like that, but if you're a number 9, your job is to score goals. And if you're not doing it, then you're definitely not doing your job. So there is a big question in terms of that number 9 position and whether they're going to sign a DP number 9 as a result of that. I mean, with the way that recently it seems like teams around the league are splashing like $10 million to get a DP number 9, I won't be surprised if the Rapids might do so, or maybe they're going to really trust that Darren Yappy will finally figure things out. But also, the defense is going to be a weakness of this team. Of all the changes that they made this offseason, they didn't really change the back line and especially the center back partnership. I mean, the wing backs and the fullbacks are an instant upgrade. I mean, getting Sam Vines back to this team is going to be an instant upgrade than they had with Miguel Navarro. But still, the defense, it's still Maxo and Abubakar as the two center back partnership, and they were bad last season. I mean, they were really bad when it comes to that. So that's going to be big question mark, and this is where you're just hoping Zach Steffen can get himself back to the form that he was when he was supposed to be the replacement for Tim Howard once he retired, and he's gonna have to bail out that back line a couple of times. But yeah, obviously the weakness of the defense and number 9 position, and really just who's gonna score the goals for this team is a huge question mark too. I mean, when you look at this team, as good of the big pieces they have, none of those guys are really kind of guys that I would say are true goal scorer for this team. So that's going to be something that they might be thinking about, maybe even in the summer transfer window. I think they're probably done in terms of this offseason because they've made so many moves that I think they're pretty much right up against the cap and right up against what they were hoping to kind of completely restructure this team. Now, in terms of expectation, I would say compete for the playoffs. Obviously, I'm not going to say that they're going to make the playoffs because I do think, like I said, the defense and the goal scoring is still a big question. But it can't be as bad as last season. I mean, I think this is going to be something that for the Rapids, I feel like I'm going to say the same thing like what I said with the San Jose Earthquakes last season when the Quakes was fresh off of a year where they finished dead last in the standings and they have a new head coach in Luchi Gonzalez. And that I was expecting that while they made some good pieces during that season, I wasn't expecting them to be a playoff team, but at least kind of just show that progress that they can heading to that spot. That's what the Colorado Rapids are going to do this season. They're going to be that team that could be compete the playoffs. And who knows if things works out with this team, this could be a dark horse team. I mean, the Rapids have known to be a dark horse team and a team that when they do get all these reclamation project and all these platoon kind of players that turns out to do well. This team can be a surprise in the Western Conference, but as of now, I think the realistic expectation is for them to compete for those playoff position or at least being on the bubble in terms of competing for the playoffs. There you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at the Colorado Rapids in this season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. And if you're a Rapids fan, what do you think is your strength, your weakness, and your expectation heading into this season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to leave a like, smash the subscribe button. And yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.